Hello, today we have Colonel Rajiv Kohli, expert in disaster management with us. We request Dr. Kohli to discuss about the role of armed forces in disaster management, which is really important at the time of disaster. Dr. Kohli, kindly discuss.
Thank you, Dr. Nandini. As we all know, the armed forces are a very important resource of the nation, and they represent a unique technological and logistic capability which can be mobilized at short notice, and this is very suitable for disaster management. In fact, any major natural disaster or otherwise, the armed forces are always in the forefront. In fact, as has been seen in the recent tsunami of December last year, even the armed forces themselves were affected by it, yet they were in the forefront of rescue and relief operations. Now, to understand the role of the armed forces, we would have to understand the capabilities, how the country can utilize these resources under the legal provisions, and what sort of reactions are expected from them. As we all know, there are various types of assistance that the armed forces can provide. The type of assistance depends on the guiding principles which must be kept in mind before we can employ the armed forces. The armed forces should be judiciously used. In fact, you would have noticed that there is always a hue and cry after a disaster, and sometimes it is a political compulsion to call the armed forces. In fact, only when there is a need and the other resources are not available, we should call the Army, Navy or Air Force. Another thing is, armed forces would generally be required when there is an immediate response expected, and disasters, as we all know, are such events where the population and is a victim to the hazard which has struck, and hence their requirement comes up very quickly. The other principle is the command of the troops, means the troops are always taking orders from their superior officers. It becomes very difficult to break up this command structure for the armed forces. Hence, the way the tasks are given, that has to be kept in mind, that the complete unit or subunit as a whole has to be employed on a task basis, and not that the requisition of the armed forces is done on the basis of the number of people required. That would also help the authorities to get work done and not get a given number of people, but to assign the role and let the local commander decide how to get the work done. There is sometimes a fallacy that any type of labor task should be given to the armed forces. In fact, for labor requirement, the local population is the best resource. It also helps in other things of rehabilitation and psychological involvement of the local population when they are employed in large number for their own help. Yes, of course, the armed forces does all sorts of jobs when there is a need for it. Next thing is that the requisition of the aid has to be on task basis. This has already been covered because of the requirement to keep the troops under the command of their own officers, and also to be clear that what work is expected out of the armed forces. Whenever the armed forces are called, liaison and coordination is a very important aspect. Liaison would always be both sides, that is liaison between the armed forces and the civilian authority, and from civilian authority with the armed forces. This is generally by exchange of liaison officers, so that they, all the organizations know what is happening and what is expected out of them. Of course, in any good planning activity is very important, Hence, the armed forces should be employed or should be involved in the planning for disaster management at all stages. Also, training and especially joint training is a very important aspect to ensure the effective disaster response. In this, I would like to emphasize that the planning and training is not only within the armed forces or within the groups themselves, but also the joint planning, the joint training, and the mushing up of the plans with each other's activities. Next is the integration of all resources. In fact, within the armed forces also this is done, integration of the resources of the Air Force, of the Army, and also the integrating the resources of the all civil authorities, the PWD, the civilian engineering force, the police and the NGOs, along with the armed forces having its various echelons. And another thing which we must emphasize is the early de-requisitioning of the armed forces. The armed forces are called upon, and then also as soon as possible they should be relieved from disaster management duties so that they can return to their principal activities. Now, after understanding these principles for employing armed forces, we must also be clear that these activities are undertaken by the armed forces under the legal and constitutional provisions, and this is generally termed as aid to civil authorities. In this, the civilian authority, generally the district magistrate if it is an emergency, or the state government, they requisition with a request to the central government, who through the Ministry of Defence allocate the units for, and in case of an emergency even the local district magistrate can approach the local military commander for aid. Now, if you see the slide, the assistance is for basically 4 purposes: maintenance of law and order. This is generally called help to the civilian administration for police duties. There could be then maintenance of essential services, sometimes a breakdown of services either due to natural calamities or due to strikes, riots or any other disturbance, maybe war conditions. Thirdly, there is assistance also requisitioned for natural and all other calamities, and in this case disaster management is a very important role of the armed forces. Lastly, armed forces are also requisitioned for any other type of assistance, and this could also be in development projects, and by this you would be able to recall that in the northeast or in our northern areas or remote areas, the army is involved in a lot of development projects, construction of roads, bridges, and help to villagers during some problem or the other. So, after we have understood this, let us see how the armed forces is organized to respond for disaster management, or for that matter any other operational duties. The armed forces has the headquarter integrated defense staff, which looks after policy plans and the force development and the various branches in it. It has operation branches, then it looks after the doctrines, organizations, training and other branches are there. It has intelligence branch, and then the logistics or support branches along with the medical. And disaster management as a policy is a tri-services, that is of all the 3 services of the armed forces, the army, the navy and the air force, is a joint response plan has been issued, and they also interact at the Ministry of Defence and Ministry of Home Affairs level on related issues at the national level, so that you will understand that headquarter integrated defense staff is basically the organization at the national level, apex organization of the armed forces, and they interact with the Ministry of Defence and also Ministry of Home Affairs for disaster management. Now, if you look at the organization of this headquarter integrated staff, and inter-service organization for emergency response. The nodal organization is this headquarter integrated defense staff. It is in touch with the operation room or the war room of the three services, the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. It is also in touch with the National Disaster Management Control Room. Then it has link with the other Government of India organizations. It could be the Meteorological Department for early warning, or it could be the Ministry of Health for medical response. Then under it are the field forces, that is the command headquarters of the Army, Navy, Air Force, which have their own control rooms, which are generally linked or at the level of the state disaster management control room. So you can see that at the state level, the state disaster management control room would interact with the field forces control room, that is the command headquarters control room. So we have the various Army commands, Navy commands and Air Force commands, and these are generally in different states or more than one state. So it is at the state level they are the ones who interact, and below that there would be units, functional teams which would be formed for specific tasks, and they would respond to specific disasters. And the response time by this method of organizing and this communication channel would be very quick. In fact, almost instantaneous reaction can be expected, and in many cases like the recent tsunami or the Gujarat earthquake, it was found that the armed forces were at the spot within a few hours, because these elements are located all over the country, and the elements which are in the disaster zone, they respond immediately even when they are themselves affected by it. And this has been the case in Gujarat earthquake also, where the Air Force unit at Bhuj was affected. In the tsunami in the Andaman Islands, the Air Force unit, the airfield itself was affected. The people had to be evacuated themselves, but nevertheless the armed forces immediately responded for the help of their countrymen.
Sir, most of our viewers will be interested to know how they contribute or in which areas.
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if you look at it, there are innumerable number of areas. In fact, in all types of disasters, the armed forces are expected to help. People also look forward to their help when they are in need, and of course because of their special capabilities and organization and their wherewithal, their training, they are able to respond and meet all types of unforeseen needs also. But definitely when they have been earlier, their role has been planned and integrated, the response would be better. And in fact, if we see the next slide, it will help us in understanding how these capabilities and resources of the armed forces can be utilized. This could be for any type of natural calamity or other man-made calamity, but these capabilities are always there. These specific capabilities are 12 of them have been shown. First is the planning. In fact, armed forces has a very good organization, and because of that, a good planning, a good early planning, they make their own internal security schemes in all the areas where they try to foresee what are the hazards and how they can be integrated in the various roles. Also, the organization structure has been on a brick basis. It is well integrated chain of command right from the national level down to the functional team levels. The response time of course is minimal because of their training and because of the specialized equipment which is provided to them. The Air Force and the helicopters, they respond very fast from far flung areas where there is no road communication. At sea and in water, the Navy, boats, ships and even the divers are used. So the response time is really very quick. Once the armed forces has been integrated into the disaster management plan, the response time becomes even better. The integral communication with the various units is one of the best available in the country. In fact, it's not only that they can use their communication only for their own use, but also this communication can be used for other purposes during disaster management, and their trained specialists and experts can be used to restore the local communication. In fact, after the earthquake in Gujarat and even after the Odisha cyclone, the army's communication and the personnel were used to re-establish the local telephone exchanges and the telephone communication and other communication systems. Engineering aspects of the armed forces is something which is integral to them. They have bulldozers, they have boats for moving in water, they have cutting equipment for land cutting, land moving, they have generator sets for electricity, and then so many other type of equipment are there which can set up temporary camps or establish temporary bridges, or even roads or trails can be made immediately in areas which are required. The next thing, of course, there is a manpower which is trained, which is technically qualified for specific tasks, for engineering, for medical, for communication. So all these can be used. Of course, then next thing is search and rescue. The role of armed forces in search and rescue is very good because of their inherent training. They have rescue equipment, they have been trained for rescue, for mountains, for in other areas, deep sea diving. So specific specialist people are also available. There are army dogs which are found very useful, especially to search out buried people from during earthquakes or during avalanches or landslides where the people get buried. The transport, in fact, transport is one of the backbone of the armed forces. The Air Force, as you all know, has transport aircrafts and helicopters for moving large quantities of men and material over large distances. The Navy moves lot of material through sea. In fact, in the tsunami recently and in the earthquake in Bhuj, these were used very effectively, and these ships were also converted into hospitals subsequently for carrying the sick and wounded to give them treatment.
It will be very useful in the case of sea accidents.
Sea accidents, of course, it is the Navy, and with their capabilities of the shipping as well as some helicopters, they are very useful in rescuing people, especially in ship accidents, or even in fact even they have a very great role in environmental management of the coastal areas, especially oil spills and those types of disaster, ecological disasters also. Medical and health aspects are very important after a disaster, and a great need is there, and the army doctors, they are able to set up field hospitals very quickly. The evacuation of the wounded through the air, helicopter, ships and other means is also done, and even in the other cases there is help provided to beef up the local civil hospitals also, and these doctors and medical teams can be mobilized from other places and made effective because they have specialized equipment which can move and is mobile. Hospital sort of things can be set up at like a field treatment centers. Then of course there is many times requirement for protection of life and property after disasters, and in case sometimes to help the civil police also. Setting up of shelters and camps. In fact, this shelter management, camp management itself is a very specialized task, and it is required because a large number of population is displaced after a disaster, and army itself has people who are well trained into managing these types of camps. They have rations with them, they have cooking facilities, they can set up bathing and water arrangements at the field level. So all these things also help. Also another thing we must remember, we have a very good territorial army which is an auxiliary force which is available in the country. It comprises of normal civilians who volunteer for limited army service, and territorial army units are there for railways, for supplies, for transport, for engineers, for specialized, for medical, so that in case of a war they are meant to be mobilized and become additional force, but they are also can be used for disaster response also. And you would have all heard of the ecological battalions of the army which are working. These are also part of the territorial army.
Okay.
So they are already doing a lot of work, and of course now there is also a lot of thinking going on to have specialized disaster management battalions part of the territorial army.
And that will be very useful.
That would be very useful, and they would be specifically trained. Territorial army units are generally static and they are located in a particular area. Hence, if there is a disaster management territorial army battalion, this could be located in a particular area and specialized for the disasters that could probably occur in those areas only. Like coastal units could be for cyclones and tsunamis, or units in mountains for forest fire, or for landslides.
Landslides, no avalanches, we definitely need for Jammu and Kashmir and in other areas.
That's right. So that is one of the thinking going on. And another organization is the Border Roads Organization. You would have all heard of it. It is under the General Reserve Engineering Force. This is also a very large force available working in the border areas to maintain the difficult land communication, that is the making the and maintaining the roads, and they themselves in fact are managing the natural disasters because they themselves are affected by it. As you all know, recently the Jammu Kashmir highway was blocked because of avalanches, and so avalanches in most of the border in the Himalayan areas they are always facing, and they are the ones who keep the roads open even after such adverse natural conditions. They themselves are trained into these jobs and a very important part of the lifeline in these areas. Then there is the Coast Guard, which is also having a very important role in the marine activities, or the shipping, naval or the civilian shipping activity, not only controlling smuggling and other such tasks, but also for coming to aid of vessels which are in danger or people who are at sea and in danger. So they themselves play a very important. We must also remember that the veterinary aspects of disaster management are very important, and the army has a veterinary corps, remount veterinary corps, which has specialized to look after the animal life and and they have been in the forefront for especially in the rural areas and the far-flung areas.
Most of affected people are from rural areas. Yes. And their employment and everything depends upon livestock.
On the livestock. So they are the ones who can provide help for the livestock. They provide the veterinary aid, the rehabilitation of the animals, the rescue of the animals, and in addition to that also other things, like improving the breed of the livestock in particular areas. So these type of activities are also undertaken by them. And lastly, I would also cover a very important aspect which is coming up now is the bomb disposal units which are there. As we all know that we are all affected by the terrorist and bomb threats,
yes, of course,
in a large number, and it creates such a big panic. Just imagine at a crowded place there is a threat of bomb or an aircraft.
So these days everybody is afraid, at railway station, airport, or if we see cinema halls.
That's right, all crowded places have it, and these units are trained to deal with such situations. So now you will find that all these are of course a very important aspect for armed forces. But let me come down that you must be trying to understand that what is armed forces by itself mean.
Yes, sir.
Armed forces, of course, for everybody it means some body of or an organization which is uniformed. Yes, but along with it also there are other uniformed organizations like the police forces, the paramilitary forces, they are also there, they are also uniformed organizations. But the difference I would say would mean that in our context armed forces, when we say, are the organizations which are under the Ministry of Defence, whereas the police forces would be under the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Okay.
So by the term itself you would understand that for the armed forces they would be for the purpose of defence and for warlike activities, whereas for police, which being under the Home Ministry, would be for all internal activities within the country to help the civilian population, for policing duties, for law and order, and for everything which happens. So another thing we could understand by it, that armed forces as a principle, guiding principle also it has been brought out, should be only the last resort when nothing else is available, whereas the other forces, the police forces, should be the first resort.
Certainly.
The fire brigade also is there. So these are there which even for a small thing they should be well in advanced position and utilized. That's their home guards are there, the civil defense is there. All these could be given this role, and now the roles are emerging for them also for disaster management. In fact, the CISF is having disaster management units which are being raised, specially equipped and trained for these things. Of course, whenever there is a armed forces or a organization is there, you would see that it doesn't have a specific work all the time throughout the year, or the work may be there, but it could be diverted to another higher priority area like disaster management when the situation arises. So that would be another distinction. Now understanding the armed forces a little bit more, we can say that the Army, Navy, Air Force has units, like we covered the headquarters integrated defense staff at the national level with the Army headquarters, Naval and Air Force headquarters, but the operational ones are the command headquarters, Army commands, there are 5 of them or more, and similarly Air Force and Naval command. Under them are, under the Army is the corps headquarters, the divisional headquarters and the brigade headquarters, under which would be the units. So there are various functional units, and these infantry, armored corps, these are the we can say fighting units, but they have lot of trained manpower available, and they are specialized units of the engineer regiments, the signal battalions, the electrical mechanical engineers, the field ambulance. So these are for specialized purposes, so they can be used for the specific task. Similarly, Air Force has different types of squadrons, the fighter squadrons, the transport aircraft squadrons, the helicopter squadrons, which have flights and other things. So Air Force, when we look at it, generally we mean that it would be the air transport efforts of helicopters and transport aircraft which would be made to use during disasters, and for Navy it would be the ships basically. But in addition to that, there is trained manpower which is always available for specific tasks, and they are all having their own medical support, the logistics support, the communication support, the engineering support. So these are the other things which can be used for. And whenever an army unit at the field level, at the task force level moves out, it is called a column. So it would be generally a self-contained unit of around 100 men, could be much more, it could be much less also, but it is well integrated depending on the task. It could have it would have support of the medical people, the engineering people, the communication people, so along with it. So that is how it moves out. And I think from this you can see that if we take the example of Gujarat earthquake, the army was used for search and rescue. It was used for improving the road communication and establishing bridges which were damaged. it was used for the communication, the telephone communication, the satellite communication or the wireless communications. The medical assistance was used, it was managing camps, it was also providing medical aid. Of course, then it also provided subsequently in rehabilitation aid for the livestock and for psychological help. In fact, it's a big psychological relief when a group of people in trouble, they find that the armed forces have arrived there. So that itself brings a lot of psychological relief. And overall, we can sum it up by saying that the armed forces are always there to help during disaster management. They are trained, they are motivated, they are organized, and they have the wherewithal to do this. But it always comes that in disaster management, it should be we who should ourselves help first and then depend on our neighbors. So, while we have understood all this, I think we could now also go and see what the NGOs would cover the role in disaster management.
Of course, you said very rightly that armed forces are definitely helping during disasters and immediately after disasters. But when we talk about the situation before disasters, that is preparedness stage, then at that time role of NGOs and community is very important, even during and after disaster also. When we talk about short term planning and long term planning, at that time role of NGOs is very important. Non-governmental organizations are cooperating in various areas, and there are different types of non-governmental organizations. There are non-governmental organizations which are helping in providing financial aid, material, and NGOs which are dedicated field operations, development technological related NGOs, NGOs which are having their special interest. Then there are different associations of local occupation groups, local residents associations, religious and charitable bodies, educational institutions, and media. When you will listen media, at that time you will certainly think that what we are talking, whether media is non-governmental organization. Of course, media which is not under the government or under the control of government, that is non-governmental organizations. Here the role of Red Cross Society and role of Rotary Club is very important. Dr. Kohli was also associated with CARE, that is also a non-governmental organization. We will discuss how CARE is helping. So, can you say a little about this role of CARE?
It is very interesting to know that all NGOs which you just mentioned, the various types of NGOs and international NGOs with links in many countries, like CARE has been about 80 countries it is functioning, and they have organizations at the national level also, international level of course, but they are national level, and then at state level, and then they are functioning at the grassroots level, and after that they also partner with other local organizations also. And disaster management is one important aspect for all NGOs, because NGOs by their very nature, when they are working with the communities, and in case of any disaster they have to be part of the community at that time. So, they are involved in disaster management right from the preparedness stage, pre-disaster, and of course post-disaster also they stay with them. In CARE or like any other, they work with other NGOs in collaboration with each other, they work in partnership with the government, and they work for the people. In fact, it could also be symbolized sometimes that the NGOs are representing the communities.
No, of course, like we have seen different NGOs, their role is very important at the pre-disaster stage. Our next slide will highlight their role at the pre-disaster stage, that is in creating awareness through campaigns, vulnerability analysis, training which they provide to local volunteers, and inventory, that is making a list of resources which are available with the community, and advocacy and planning. In planning they are playing very important role.
I'd like to add over here that planning itself is a very important aspect in disaster management, because planning starts with preparedness.
Yes,
it
sir.
is a pre-disaster activity also, and then planning has to continue throughout, and the plans have to be modified during disaster
Definitely.
and during response, and then it continues even after the response into the
Of course, of
rehabilitation
course.
stage, and even then it has to be merged with the normal developmental plans.
Of course, of
So
course.
that is how the role of the NGOs in planning is very important, to bring the community's point of view
Exactly,
in the
because
focus.
they are very near to the community
Yeah.
and they know their needs and basic requirements very well. So when we discuss of their role during disaster, that is also very important, and our next highlight will present their role during disaster. Here they play their role in rescue and providing first aid to the victims. They supply food and medicines. They play their role in sanitation and hygiene also. Then their very important role is in damage assessment, that really help the government in planning for future development, and in disposal of dead, which is definitely required for maintaining the hygiene condition in the society. They are playing important role in post-disaster stage also, and in post-disaster stage their role in providing technical and material aid in reconstruction, assistance in seeking financial aid, and monitoring. Monitoring, as we have already discussed the case of Latour. Definitely in post rehabilitation stages monitoring is very important, and as they are well versed about the local area and local requirements, they play important role, and their role is very significant, which is acceptable and really important in making final decisions.
In fact, I would say from my experience in the NGOs that they are giving lot of emphasis to monitoring and evaluation of their
Yes, sir.
work. In fact, after the Gujarat earthquake, after 2 years after that, Christian Aid, which was funding 7 NGOs, I was involved with the evaluation work,
Okay.
and subsequently it is very heartening to see that the work, because it was well planned and constantly monitored, so the outcomes at the community levels were much better.
Because they are very well aware about the community needs. So their role and their importance, then definitely there are certain areas where they are contributing a lot. These areas are communication with the community, as we have already discussed that they are very near to the community and they know community needs very well. So this is very important step. And next is manpower. They provide manpower like in different phases. They arrange finance and they mobilize the finance and material, and they help the society in recovering very fast. Last is the professional and technical services. There are different voluntary organizations which are contributing in providing these type of assistance, like in reconstruction and rehabilitation works. Their role is very important. These voluntary organizations are helping the people in taking final decisions and in getting their facilities which are required and in fulfilling their requirements and satisfaction stage. Now their major role is in coordination with the government, with other NGOs, with donor agencies, and transparency. Transparency is definitely required when we are planning and we are working for the development. So we have confidence in our non-governmental organizations, either it is at the international level, national level, state level, or local level. Local level NGOs are really transparent because community based organizations and community members are monitoring the work which they are doing. So in this case, when we talk about the role of various agencies in disaster management, we think about the government, we think about the armed forces as we have discussed, and we think about the community. But how to organize and mobilize resources and how to organize the youth members, definitely role of NGOs is important. They can organize the community and youth who can really help at the time of disaster immediately in providing relief. Dr. Kohli, we are really thankful and everything is very much clear as I personally feel. If you need any help, we are very much here to help you. We are providing this study material through print and audio video programs also. Thank you very much.
you.